Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on Legends of Tomorrow Season 4, and this is going to be my review for Episode 3, otherwise entitled Dancing Queen. But of course, before we jump into the rest of the video, spoiler alert, because we're going to be going over like the big points of this episode, including spoilers, so go watch this episode, then come back to it later on. But if you are continuing on, you've watched the episode, be sure to drop a like on it, show support for the Legends videos, and of course let me know in the comments section down below your various opinions on this episode. The last episode saw us travel to Salem in I think 1690 something I think it was, but the main thing to really take away from that episode was stuff to do with Nate, where he actually ends up joining the Time Bureau and sort of leaves the Wave Rider. But this episode we're heading to London in 1977, and we start off the episode by seeing Queen Elizabeth. I guess the correct term is like getting turned up. That's probably the best term to use. And it's in a punk rock club. And yeah, basically what happens is that due to all this, is just a domino effect. The monarch collapse, and then eventually just leads to essentially the United Kingdom collapsing as well. Now we do actually see Zari's totem turn into like a wristband. So last episode, obviously like the gold around the totem was like melted due to the fire. All that was left was the actual like red stone totem sort of thing. And Ray has put that into a wristband, which I think is much easier, I guess, because I think that the one issue that they were always going to face with Zari was going out in public in certain time eras, and she was wearing that big necklace, like it sticks out like a sore thumb. With the wristband, it just looks like a bracelet almost, like the stone is even covered a bit more, so it's a bit like the red stuff is not as exposed as before. So I think this is a suitable, and it makes sense why they did this. But yeah, I'm all for it. I think it just makes more sense because Zari can then, wear the wristband all the time rather than the totem, which, stood out a bit, and you wouldn't be able to wear it like in the 2000s and stuff like that. It would just look a bit weird. But essentially the band that was sort of influenced or, surrounding this whole thing with Queen Elizabeth was this band called The Smell. So what a name. And I think John Constantine predicts that one of the guys would be a leprechaun, and he's the mythical or magical or mystical creature that they're dealing with in this episode. But of course, that's not the case. But our connection to The Smell throughout the episode is, of course, Ray, who becomes their driver and I guess new member, or at least groupie. Is that what we're going to call? I don't know, member, whatever we'll call him. Ray's just a part of them now. I thought Ray was really good this episode. I think he was, he's had his episode to shine. And it was just funny how he had to go against everything that he is. So it wasn't Ray that was in this episode, it was Rage. And it was just basically the reverse Ray, if you want to call him. So he hates disco, even though Ray he definitely likes some disco and some more poppy songs. Not really all for the punk music like The Smell are. Another one of the major parts in this episode in regards to just one or two characters was definitely Nate and Gary, and just, Nate dealing with all the new Time Bureau stuff he was going through, where it definitely isn't as exciting as, going around on the Wave Rider and stopping all those anachronisms and aberrations and all of that. And to really get something done, he has to sort of just suck up to Gary a bit, and they become Time Bros. But in the Time Bureau in this episode, we do actually meet the new character for this season of Mona. Now, or Sandwich Girl or Food Girl, whatever you want to call her. But essentially, Mona is a series regular this season. She's, or for future seasons possibly, but she's a regular main sort of character for this season. So eventually she's sort of going to make her way onto the Wave Rider. Obviously, they're going to use the Time Bureau as that avenue to connect her to the Wave Rider. I think from what I remember during their press releases and the character description for this episode, she gets bitten by one of the magical creatures. I don't know if they're still going to go with that because that was really early on, but she will be a Wave Rider, and I think on the Wave Rider, I think she ends up getting powers, but it could be through whatever she's bitten by. It could be some magical elf, and now she can fly. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Now, one part for this episode that was heavily promoted in previous trailers and just general promo material was definitely the stuff with the corgis, because when you think of the royal family, one of the things a lot of people will think of is the royal dogs, that being the corgis. The Queen loves her corgis. So we saw Ray becoming a corgi thief, which I thought was pretty funny, seeing Mick walk him through it. Him being I think they said the QB as in the quarterback, so I thought that was pretty cool. Now, really the only issue I have with this episode was a bit where Constantine and Zari were in a bar, and who was there? It was actually Constantine's mother and father. Now, that scene I'm fine with, Zari and Constantine, gelling and becoming better characters together. I'm fine with that. The only issue I had was they introduced this stupid new time rule, which can... I'm not the biggest fan of it because I just think it's going to affect stuff that we've already seen and, stuff going forward. Now, I can't remember the actual term. I think it was something paradoxical or paradox or something like that. But essentially what it was is that you can't do something that threatens your existence. So in this case, Constantine was going to give his dad the something vasectomy or something, like a back alley vasectomy or something. Or essentially he was just going to kick him really, really hard in the nuts and hopefully make him shoot blanks for the rest of his life, I guess. But he was tried to do that and just basically like got respawned or like got sent back a couple of seconds in time and fell flat to the floor because he would have been preventing himself from being born, you know? So I think this is something that's going to come to a head later this season. I can't see why they would bring it up if it isn't going to be relevant later in the season. So when it becomes relevant again, that's for us to wait and see. But I'm not the biggest fan of this. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below if you think this is just like a convenience thing. Because I think in regards to other stuff that's happened in the past in the Arrowverse as well as just Legends specifically, it doesn't really make too much sense. We do get a callback to like the disco episode from last, not the disco episode, but like the disco intro. So I think one of the episodes from last season picked up and the Legends were coming back from a mission in the 1970s where they, were doing disco music and stuff like that. But it's during this process that we find out that Charlie is actually a shapeshifter. So early in the episode, Ray had figured out that she's the issue, but we weren't too sure exactly what was up with it. Like what abilities does she have? And she's a shapeshifter. And it's through this process that we actually find out that she was the queen, which I guess makes sense when you look back at some of the rest of the episodes. And she was basically just trying to steal the jewels and all of that. Now, one of the more random parts of the episode, I wasn't really expecting it, but I guess it tied back to just Gary being a bit reckless, was the Venus sort of flytrap monster thing or plant in the Time Bureau, which Gary had brought back from when him and Nate had gone and been Time Bros. He brought it back from the past, which made you think, Gary was at the smartest decision there. But essentially, it runs rampant through the Time Bureau. We didn't get to see too much of it, but it would have been expensive CGI-wise. So I guess just the fact that it came alive and we saw it run off, I think was fine. I'm fine with them just cutting to them, after they've actually defeated it. So I'm fine with that. But when we started to see like Ray taking on Legends, I was sort of confused. But I was like, this isn't Ray. Like just the facial expressions he was giving off, I was like, okay, this definitely isn't Ray. And then we find out that it was actually Charlie, shape-shifting into him and taking his Atom suits. I was like, okay, well, that explains it all. But basically, to avoid being sent to hell, looking at the newspaper and also having that previous conversation with Ray where she finds out that Amaya's gone and Ray really misses her, which would, spread onto the rest of the team. Charlie transforms into Amaya in that disco outfit and basically causes Zari not to throw her into hell. So good move there, Charlie, I guess. That's one way to save her ass. But this basically explains how Maisie Richardson Sellers, who played Amaya last season, was going to factor into this season because Constantine removes Charlie's powers while she's, looking like Amaya. So she can't shapeshift anymore, so she's stuck looking like Amaya. Now, I think this is actually a smart way to bring Maisie Richardson Sellers back into the show. This is a completely different character, as we saw right at the end of the episode. Maisie Richardson Sellers is British, so she can keep a natural accent, but put more... I don't know, in Australia we'd call it like a bogan. I don't know what you'd call it in England. Like what would you put like a, really like heavy and over the top and I guess just a bit, dodgy and a bit filthy. I don't know what the correct term to use is, but she's going that extra mile. And obviously this is going to be a very different character to Amaya. And as we saw at the end of the episode with Sarah coming to speak to Nate, she was obviously going to go tell him like, yo, there's someone that looks like Amaya down there, blah, blah, blah. She's obviously, backed off from doing that because of what Nate said. But I guess the big question is, when will Nate find out that someone who looks like Amaya, exactly like Amaya, is back on the Wave Rider? Because that's the reason he went to the Time Bureau, because every single room he went to on the Wave Rider just reminded him of Amaya. So what's he going to do when he finds out that someone is on the Wave Rider who looks exactly like Amaya? Going to be interesting. He might be a bit ticked off that they didn't tell him early, but that's for us to wait and see. And also, as I said, this character of Charlie is much different than the character of Amaya. So, I don't know if Nate will have the same relationship with her as he did Amaya. But overall, this is a solid, decent episode. Really, it was all to bring in Charlie into the show, I think, for the most part. Like, that's the one thing you really remember from the episode. And then maybe, I guess, the introduction of Mona into the Time Bureau, even though she only had, 2 or 3 parts. So Charlie is the main thing to take from this episode, but they had to, I think, dedicate some time to it. They couldn't just have her show up. I guess that maybe they could have twisted into maybe something more revolved around the plot, but I'm fine with them spending this episode just having a fun adventure to London in 1977 and having the Charlie stuff be integrated into that. I think it works personally. So for that, I think this episode's a decent watch, and I think it's still good. But thanks for watching, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on the video to show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on this episode of Legends of Tomorrow. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you love it? Did you despise it? Just let me know your favorite parts in the comment section down below as well. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe. I'll catch you later, guys. Goodbye.